Friends, at this time we are going to begin the services for Joyce, Carol, Weiner. If you have a cell phone or a pager, I would ask for you to please take a moment and turn it off or place it on the silent mode, but turning it off is even a little bit better. And officiating today's services will be Cantor Michelle Drucker-Friedman from Emmanuel Congregation.
A poem I shared with Joyce the last time I saw her. When Death Comes by Mary Oliver. When death comes, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering, what is it going to be like, that cottage of darkness? And therefore, I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And I look upon time as no more than an idea. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy and as singular, and each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending, as all music does, towards silence, and each body a lion of courage and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say, all my life, I was a bride, married to amazement. Shiviti Adonai leneged tamid ki mimini balemot לכן שמח ליבי ויגל כבודי, אף בשרי ישכון לבטח. כי לא תעזוב נפשי לשאול, לא תיתן חסדך לראות שחט, תודיעני אורח חיים. אורח חיים, סובה שמחות את פניך, נעמוד במנחה נצח. שביתי אדוני לנגד תמיד, כי ממני I've set the eternal always before me. God is at my side, I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult and my soul rejoice. My being is secure. For you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful ones see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. Death has taken our beloved Joyce. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there is lamentation. In their tears, there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God. Be with them. For Joyce's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for her companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of her heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and are now precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give thanks to God. In this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that brings us the new message of God's nearness. It tells us of our kinship with the Creator, in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. Inside of the pamphlets that you are given is the 23rd Psalm. Please join with me. God is my shepherd. I shall not want. God maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Isai el harim me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai Ose shamayim v'aretz al yitein lamor raglecha al yanum shorecha hine lo yanum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael Adonai shomrecha Adonai tzilcha al yad yeminecha Yomam Hashem ashlo yakeka V'reach v'layla I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your soul, your coming, your going, now and forever. There are several speakers who wish to share their personal remembrances of our dear Joyce. Please come up after the last speaker is finished in this order. Sharon Solwitz, Pam Kahi, Judy Moss, and her beloved Ethan Kaplan and David Kaplan. Sharon.
I've written this to Joyce. You wore Van Gogh colors, teal, tawny cream, sunflower yellow. I don't remember how we met, though Judy must have introduced us. You had a pair of yellow high heels. I didn't know you that well then. I admired your shoes and the fact you had chosen them and wore them. You were with your second husband, a man I would have called intense, though I didn't say that to you. You had left your first husband, a doctor for this man, an illustrator. Did I tell you that that impressed me? For the spirit it took and the hopefulness to abandon safety for intensity. You moved to New York City, though I didn't know it till we met by chance after you returned at a little bar, the Inkwell. We must not have been that close. I was with Barry now, married to him or about to marry him. I was happier than before, not that I'd seen myself as unhappy. You told me about a new guy who was in and out of your life, the pain and thrill of it. We were fascinated by men, our reactions to them and theirs to us. Mostly I remember how excited we were to see each other, as if instead of having been only casual friends, we had been close friends, miraculously reunited. Then our lives started to run in a bit of a parallel. A summer day on the deck of Barry's house in the woods in Grantsburg where we sunbathed topless. Barry photographed us, our smooth, golden skin. Then came Iowa, the workshop you didn't expect to get into and got into and invited me to share with you. your writing, which you shared with me, which told me so much more about you than I had known. You are complicated. It took me a while to understand the scope of it. I got glimpses when I read your work. Here's one image I remember from one of your stories. A man who loves a woman who loves another man. She finds the first man curled in a ball outside the door of her room. What a mind you had. Back in Chicago, you brought your new writing and also this interesting new guide, David Kaplan, an Iowa workshop star, love object for many. And it was you he wanted. You two got married in our yard, and maybe you just had the reception there. I was a nursing mother at the time and wore a white lace top that my mother had sewed for me that I could lower when the need arose. We both wanted babies, but it wasn't easy for either of us. That it happened at all seemed to be another miracle. But how amazing to be late in life moms, suddenly swathed in baby love. Remember the beauty of our children, Seth, Jesse, Ethan who drew dinosaurs like a master. I know I told you my boys said your boy was cool. They were 9 or 10 at the time. He was maybe 5. When you got sick at first, it wasn't as if you were really sick. It was just some arduous new task you had taken on. You chatted about chemo and cancer as if it were interesting as opposed to terrifying. You still wanted to hear about my life. You were well until suddenly you weren't. But even when you could barely move, Joyce, you had new things to say. Here's what sticks with me, the kind of new conversations that you and David were having, that love doesn't abate or habituate, but keeps changing and deepening. You never said, why me? I don't think you even thought it. I would at least have thought it. Dear Joyce, there was something in you I liked that I recognized as different from me. This is a phenomenon that still fascinates me, having spent so many years wanting to find commonalities with other people. This, though, was a difference. Your childhood was a series of moves. Your parents would take you and your brother to a new city with a new house, school, new friends to make. You'd start getting used to a place, and suddenly there was the moving van and you were going somewhere else. And here's what you didn't explain, but what I surmise. Instead of being lonely or lost or isolated on account of that, you learned how to make friends, really make them, to make them quickly, and good friends, dear friends, and then somehow, this is what I imagine, you also learned how to let them go when you were pulled away. Joyce, dear and unreplaceable friend, will you teach me that? During the visit you promised me, remember? I'm waiting.
Joyce was my oldest friend in Chicago. Not oldest in years, but in length of friendship. David and I were both hired at Loyola University in the fall of 1987, and he and Joyce, along with Paul J. and Lynn Woodbury, were our first friends in Chicago, and we have all remained close friends ever since. David and Joyce were the first to visit us when we brought our son home from the hospital 31 years ago, and they were the first to visit us in our new home in Lamont last year and to meet our grandson, Connor. Joyce and I had birthdays 2 days apart, hers May 27th, mine the 29th. So for 30 years, whenever possible, the four of us would have a celebratory birthday dinner, often on the 28th, as we did this past May. We also spent countless Hanukkahs, Christmases, and New Year's Eves together. Joyce was quite simply a good friend. Good, it's such a small, innocent adjective, but in her case, imbued with such depth and warmth. She would call me out of the blue, not to make dinner arrangements or to share important news, simply to stay in touch. Hi, Pam. The warmth of her greeting made me feel I was the most important person in her life at that moment. And she was a good listener, empathetic, genuinely interested not just in what was happening to you, but how you felt about it. She was non-judgmental. In 35 years, I never heard her say a bad word about another person. Sure, she knew her friends' foibles well enough, but she didn't judge or criticize. She wanted to understand us, always sympathetic to our needs and vulnerabilities. She was deeply caring. She also had a good sense of humor and could find humor in otherwise poignant moments. Once, when she had spent all afternoon making a new pasta dish she was excited about, she and David had no sooner sat down at the table when David said he thought he might be having a heart attack and needed to get to the hospital. So they called 911, and David was taken in an ambulance with Joyce to follow in her car. When she called the next day to tell me about David, she said, somewhat guiltily, but also clearly amused, "Oh, Pam, before I went to the hospital, I ate the pasta." I visited Joyce 6 times during her 2 months in hospice, not to say goodbye, simply to stay in touch, to literally touch her. Anxious about her when away from her, I found these visits strangely calming. Although I could see her decline, her voice getting weaker, her body becoming more frail, her skin more yellow, in her eyes, and that serene smile, I felt her presence, the old familiar Joyce. And I repeated to myself like a mantra, she's still here, she's still here. On my last visit, I expressed my gratitude to Joyce, telling her that her courage, honesty, and grace in the face of death had made this ordeal easier on all of us. When I first visited, Joyce asked me to read the note I had brought, and when I began to tear up, she comforted me. It's okay to cry, Pam. That's the greatest gift of friendship, to sublimate your own fears and sorrows for the sake of your friends. And she planned this memorial, what she thought of as a celebration of life, for us. She helped choose the pictures we would see, the music we would hear, the food we would eat. And it gave her such joy to think of all of us here together in celebration of her life and friendship. She so wanted to be with us, and she is. And all of those who loved her in this room today, she's still here. She's still here. And it's okay to cry, Pam.
Joyce and I are cousins, but we didn't know each other until we were 15. So I just love the photos of Joyce's childhood that Gordon put together. Joyce's mother, Bee, and my mother were first cousins. Their fathers, Saul Buller and Anshel Buller, from the old country, were brothers. Bee and her 2 sisters grew up on Staten Island, where Joyce's grandparents owned a hardware store. In the summer, my New York City mother and her sisters were sent to the Buller cousins on Staten Island, a trip to the country in those days. So my mom and Joyce's mom were quite close. And after World War II, Bee married Al, also from Staten Island. They were friends with my parents and all lived in New York. After living in Ohio, when I was 9, we moved to Park Forest, Illinois. Growing up, as others have said, Joyce, her parents, and late brother Brian moved around the country for Al's job as an in-store advertising manager for a local department store. Perhaps this is where Joyce found her interest and talent in writing. When Joyce and I were 15 and high school sophomores, her family moved to Elgin, Illinois, which was only 75 miles from my family in South Suburban Park Forest. We were practically neighbors. And now we had cousins in the Chicago area. Our parents rediscovered each other, and I had Joyce, my brother Alex had Brian, and my youngest brother Ted had George, or Egroeg, George spelled backwards, as Uncle Al called their basset hound. Our family spent many fun-filled, uproarious weekends and holidays together, as our fathers shared great senses of humor that they passed on to us. Joyce and I became fast friends, sharing lots of adolescent drama and adventures. Oh, and Joyce and I were the only members of our 1960s club, the VUMs, Virgins Until Marriage. Ah, yes. Joyce and I were roommates at the University of Illinois in Champaign, our freshman year of college. Remember those days when girls, as we were called then, had hours? Dorm managers would lock the doors, meaning you were back by curfew or stayed out all night. Of course, Joyce and I were always back by curfew, really. Along with eating most of our meals together at Allen Hall, Joyce played several tricks on me that year. One day, I received a note in my dorm mailbox saying they had to do some work in my closet, and I had to empty it. Luckily, I figured that one out before I removed any clothes. Our families continued to be close from high school on, and of course, Joyce and I loved hanging out together. After graduating college in 1969, Joyce and I both moved to Chicago to begin our careers. We knew each other's friends and boyfriends. Joyce moved to New York to work in advertising for a couple of years, and I visited her there. She attended the Iowa's Writers Workshop from 1984 to 86, as has been mentioned, where she met David. They were married at Sharon and Barry's home on a very hot day in the summer of 1988. Joyce and David moved to their lovely home in West Walker. And in 1997, we moved to Old Irving Park nearby. Our children, Shayna and Ethan, went to the same elementary school, and we carpooled over the years. When Ethan was 4, they lived in Italy for a year while David taught at the Loyola Rome Center. Shayna and I visited them and had a wonderful time. Joyce was the nicest person I know. She was kind, compassionate, and positive. While living her life with style and grace, Joyce had a respect and admiration for how others chose to live. Joyce adored her life with David and Ethan and all they had together. Especially over the last 3 years, Joyce and I shared meals and memories. We went shopping to find a mother of the bride dress for me for Shayna's wedding last summer, and instead, Joyce found a dashing dress for herself for the wedding. Joyce helped us stuff and seal the invitations, and she so looked forward to Shayna and Adam's wedding in July. She had a great time, dancing the hora and sharing conversation at a table with David and Ethan and my niece and her family from Southern California. I spent hours with Joyce while she was in hospice, looking at photos and sharing more family stories. And Joyce said to me several times, "I am so lucky," for her dear family, close friends, and a life well lived. You are in our hearts, dear Joyce, and we will always remember you.
Most of you knew Joyce Weiner as a caring, empathetic, fun-loving friend, or a cousin, aunt, sister-in-law, you name it. But to me, she was my one and only mother. When I was young, she used to sing lullabies to me before I went to sleep, laying next to me as she did so. this went on until I was like around 10 or so, by the way. So maybe a little bit younger than that, but like 8. After singing, after a brief moment of shared silence, I would ask her, 1 more minute? And she would respond, 1 more minute. Then we would lay in shared silence for a minute or so, and she would then kiss me goodnight. And this happened every time. One of these nights, I told her that I heard noises coming from the walls and asked if she could hear them. She said she could not, and told me that I have a remarkable ear for hearing the smallest noises that nobody else could. I still think about that moment and that comment when I make music, sampling songs and moments of films in my songs. The sounds that are in the background mostly, which nobody else can hear, bringing these shy, quiet, strange noises to life. She helped me become a producer of music. I used to be a shy, quiet, strange, well, I'm still strange in several ways, but I related to those noises, and her love brought me and so many others around her to life. Sorry for the horrible joke, but I guess you could say that she was my producer. Speaking of which, she told me during one of her last weeks here with us that her greatest accomplishment was giving birth to me and having me as a son. I've also heard someone else recently tell me the same thing, though I'm ashamed I can't remember off the top of my head who it is. The fact that she told not just me, but other friends and family, this means the absolute world to me. She was always putting others before herself in so many ways and taking pride in being a friend to one and family to another. Her love truly knew no bounds. She taught me that there is love in everything around me. The first instance of this is when my favorite childhood stuffed animal, a dolphin named Fishy, I know, I thought at the time he was a fish, so he started to lose his fur, or his fluff, and his stitching was showing underneath as if he was aging. I didn't understand the concept of aging, really, but the way that my mom put it to me when I asked her, why is he losing his fluff, was because you love him so much. You're loving the fluff right off him. Recently, I have thought about this statement in regards to how I loved my mom during her cancer treatment. Before her treatment, I wouldn't show my appreciation and love nearly as much as I wished that I did. But during treatment, and especially in the final years, months, weeks, and days leading up to her death, I showed my love for her more and more and more, or at least I tried to. I would hold her hand as soon as I entered her hospital room. I would kiss her goodnight on her forehead before she went to bed. I would give her massages to try and help ease the discomfort that she was feeling. And as the days went on and her sickness progressed, she did look older. Like with my stuffed animal Fishy, the fluff was coming off her. But it makes me feel more at ease thinking that I showed her and told her how much I really loved her before she passed. I haven't even begun to scrape the surface, but she really loved a poem that is also by Mary Oliver that she said she empathized with the character in the poem, a turtle. And so I believe it's just called The Turtle, but I'll read this poem. The turtle breaks from the blue-black skin of the water, dragging her shell with its mossy scutes across the shallows and through the rushes and over the mud flats to the uprise, to the yellow sand, to dig with her ungainly feet a nest and hunker there, spewing her white eggs down into the darkness. And you think of her patience, her fortitude, her determination to complete what she was born to do. And then you realize a greater thing. She doesn't consider what she was born to do. She's only filled with an old blind wish. It isn't even hers, but came to her in the rain or the soft wind, which is a gate through which her life keeps walking. She can't see herself apart from the rest of the world, or the world from what she must do every spring. Crawling up the high hill, luminous under the sand that has packed against her skin, she doesn't dream, she knows. She is a part of the pond she lives in. The tall trees are her children. The birds that swim above her are tied to her by an unbreakable string. My mom talked about this poem while she was in hospice frequently, about how she related heavily to the turtle in it, like I said. She really was like the turtle in the way that she was so selflessly and effortlessly a mother, without ever trying, just naturally. She was always so pure with her love in a way that I can only aspire towards to be like for myself. And like the turtle in the poem, she will always have an unbreakable bond with the loved ones in her life. Every time we tell a story of her, imagine her voice, her laugh, think of her and remember her. She will break from the blue-black skin of the water. Her love and that bond has brought us all together today, and since her passing, I have learned more things about her from different people in this room, and her story lives on through us being all together to share in her memory, which I hope will continue to do long after today. She will be dearly missed, but the love she gave us remains. Thank you.
Well, I just hope that I can get through this without breaking up. So if I do, forgive me. Or bear with me, I should say. I'm already breaking up. I haven't even started. Well, I want to thank, first of all, I want to put my glasses on so I can read this. I'd like to thank all of the neighbors and friends and relatives who've been so kind and supportive in these last difficult months. Your visits to our house when she was in hospice meant a lot to her. She, in the last month, she didn't really want to read. She didn't want to watch TV. She didn't want to listen to music. But what she wanted to do and what brought her great joy was the visits that you all made. So thanks very much. I want to give some special thanks to Gordon Wallach, who produced this beautiful slideshow, and to his wife, Ruth McGallion, and to Steve and Betsy Peterson for all of the drinks and dinners and discussions that they offered to Ethan and I during this difficult time. So thanks. And I want to thank all the speakers today who've already spoken. They all had a special connection to Joyce, which you've already heard. And as she did, I thank them and I love them now and forever. Now, some thoughts about Joyce, my beloved wife. 37 years together. It seems like no time at all. Where did they go? The years, like water. Where did she go? Every day for the rest of my life, she won't be here. That's eternity. It's unfathomable. Our life. We had many adventures together, and if you've read the obituary on legacy.com, I'm just kind of repeating what you already know, but bear with me, there's a point to this. We had many adventures together, and with Ethan, our son, when he came along. We traveled to Vietnam, Cambodia, Angkor Wat, Bangkok, Peru, Machu Picchu. A dream of hers to go to Machu Picchu, and I'm so glad that we did. Costa Rica, Israel during the first Gulf War, when it seemed that we were the only tourists in Israel. Before Ethan was born, we lived for a summer in a small village on the south coast of Crete, where every day was the beach and every evening the taverna, and we could listen to the radio and the Muzain calls from Africa across the Libyan Sea, which we could see from our patio. I will never have a view like that again in my life. After Ethan was born, and he was 4 years old, we had the chance, as has been mentioned already, to live in Rome for a year. A year spent not only there, but traveling all around Italy. We were ravenous, not just for the food, but for the country and the art and the people. I recount all this not to impress with our cosmopolitanism or anything like that, but to frame what I'm about to say. Now, I always thought that I was the one encouraging us to adventure, to go elsewhere, to explore, to live in another country and so forth. But one day I realized that it was she who embarked us on the two greatest adventures of our lives. The first was getting married. It was her idea, not mine. I could have happily gone on just living together. Not that I mightily objected to marriage, it was just that she had to provide the impetus for it. Isn't it about time? Okay. And then the second great adventure, having Ethan. Again, I was happy just with the two of us. We had a good life together. Kids weren't on my radar at all. But she wanted to be a mother. And so we embarked on the often choppy and somewhat unnavigable seas of parenthood, which was her greatest joy, being a mother. And she was a great one, as you've already heard from Ethan. So, our two greatest adventures, she made them happen. And late in life, when I realized this, I told her so. There were the much smaller, quieter, but oh so meaningful moments of family life. Having alfresco dinners on our deck in the summer, which we got into in Italy and did ever since when we got back, or sitting by the fire in winter, or the three of us watching movies or cable series after dinner in the dishes, and even smaller moments, smaller individual moments I loved. Joyce in her sun hat working in her beloved garden, where some of her ashes will soon be spread. Or me coming home through the front door and yelling, hello, and she yelling hello back. Or me coming home through the back door and seeing her in the kitchen and her hearing me on the steps and smiling and opening the door for me. Moments which will never happen again. Water, eternity, unfathomable. These last months at home or in hospice were difficult for all of us, Joyce, Ethan, her friends, and me. But I'm so glad that she could die at home with Ethan and me beside her. As her main caregiver, I can tell you it was the hardest thing I've ever done. It's exhausting, hospice, both physically and emotionally. She's suffering, you're suffering, not just over her suffering, but with all the selfish emotions that I had. Impatience, frustrations, the seeming endlessness of care, even though you know it'll end, and then there'll be the real endlessness. Taking care of her in hospice made me aware of and ashamed of my many faults. But it also taught me much about myself and our relationship that was good and priceless. We had a chance for a lot of good, close talks. Hospice certainly focuses you, caregiver and cared for, on what's really important, which of course is love. We told each other how much we loved each other many times. I feel, and Joyce did too, that there was nothing between us left unsaid. We knew one another deeply. Not once in our marriage, not once, even when we had the worst fights, which weren't that often, I'm happy to say, I never once thought that our marriage had been a mistake. Not once. Not once did I feel our marriage might not endure. Not once. I trusted her and she trusted me. And even more, caring for her in hospice revealed to me the depth of my love for her, just how deep it actually was, and I told her so. And something else was revealed to me, that knowing her, loving her, living with her over the years had made me a better person. I learned from her that you can't do it alone. You need friends, you need companions, you need partners, you need love. She had given meaning to my life, I realized. And I told her that too. I'm going to close, well, what else can I say? Nothing can encompass her. She was a world, she was my world, now she's gone. That world is gone. Water, eternity. Now I'll close by, I wrote a poem for Joyce during these difficult times. And I'm not a poet, but I wrote a poem. I actually wrote 2 poems, but I'm only going to read one. And I read it to Joyce several times during these past months, and she loved it. She loved it and wanted to hear it, and so I would read it again. And I never got through the poem without breaking up, and and she too. So I'm going to read this poem. It's for Joyce. It's called A Morning Walk. I'm going to try to read it without breaking up. It's called A Morning Walk for Joyce. Sometimes I think we could just leave this lesser life, rise up out of our beds in the night, strong and well, and just walk out into the morning in its rain and radiance, the smell of pine, the way the light lingers in the leaves, and a never-ending, or so it seems, breeze ruffles us, warms our skin, promises love, also never-ending. We'll hold hands. We'll walk as we used to walk, young and fresh, the endless scroll of life before us, sleep and loss and regret far away. And look, listen, the morning calls. Let's not wait. No more talk. Take my hand now. Let's walk into it now, together.
And walk you will, David, not in the way we want you to. Thank you to all of you for your beautiful words. The Talmud says that words from the heart penetrate the heart. And it also says, add too much and you take away. And so, I had the privilege of knowing Joyce for a matter of months, and she left an indelible mark. As blessed as she was to be surrounded by so much love, her superpower was that she reflected that love 1,000-fold. And so, this poem by Bessie Coleman. She has achieved success, who has lived well, laughed often, and loved much, who has enjoyed the trust of others, the respect of the intelligent and the love of little children, who has filled her niche and accomplished her task, who has left the world better than she found it, whether by an improved poppy, a perfect poem, or a rescued soul, who has never lacked appreciation of earth's beauty or failed to express it, who has always looked for the best in others and given them the best she had, whose life was an inspiration, whose memory a benediction. I invite you to rise for the memorial prayer. אל מלא רחמים, שוכן במרמים, המסם דוכן נכונה, תחת כנפיך השכינה. אם קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר רקיע, מזהירים את נשמת ג'ויס קרול ויינר, שחלכה לעולמה. בעל רחמים, יסיריה בשאת כנפיו לעולמים, ויתרור החיים את נשמתה. אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום, בשלום על משכבה. ונאמר Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to our beloved Joyce Carol Weiner, who has entered eternity. God of mercy, let her find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. Let us all say, Amen. Please be seated.
Friends, this concludes the services here in the chapel, and the interment will take place at Rose Hill Cemetery. For those of you wishing to join the family to the cemetery, the procession will be forming just outside of the chapel. For those of you traveling with us, please make sure that your bright headlights and your four-way hazard flashes are on. We'll be providing several of the cars with a magnetic orange flag to be placed on top of your car, and we'll be providing an orange funeral sticker to be placed in the passenger side of your windshield. Please travel as close as safety permits to the car in front of you to avoid any gaps in the procession. And as we make our way through the intersections, if the car in front of you proceeds, please proceed with caution. Feel free to use your horn liberally as we go through, but please make every effort to continue to make our way together, to keep the procession together so we can arrive at the cemetery all together. Following the interment, the family will be together at the Kaplan residence at 4100 North Springfield Avenue in Chicago. They'll be together today from 2 until 8 p.m., and that information is available in the service folder that you should have received when you came in. At this time, I would ask everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the family and the clergy from the chapel.